I think a lot of people think that it's too late to start something. They hit their 40s, 50s, beyond, and they feel like they've missed their opportunity. They're too old to go back to school, start a business, start running, start exercising, changing their diet, all kinds of different things. And I can relate to this because I used to feel that way too. What this can look like is waiting even longer because you feel behind and going back and thinking about the things that you wish you could do, but still not taking any action because you feel like it's too late. Now, there are also people who may compare themselves to others and look at somebody who, maybe has been doing something for a long time. Maybe they started a business back in their 20s or 30s, and this other person is in their 40s and looking at that and saying, well, I could never be that successful. They got in early, they started early. But all that does is really just create a barrier to the things that you can actually do and go for. And it's not too late. But maybe you feel like you've missed your chance or that you need to have everything figured out first. And again, none of this is true. These are all things that you're worried about in your head, but aren't necessarily reality because as we've seen, there are so many people who do start running in their 40s, 50s, and later. They do start businesses or write a novel or whatever it is that you're dreaming of doing. There are people who are doing it in midlife and later. And I think that's just really great proof that it's never too late to pursue your dreams. I think the big reality here is that the years are going to pass regardless, right? So we're going to continue to get older. And, I'm 49 right now, and I'd like to think that I have another 25 to 30, maybe more good years in me. Just you never know. But that's what I like to think. And so, how do I want to spend those next 30 years? Do I want to just constantly be like wondering what if, or do I actually want to go for it and try to do the things that I dream of for myself? And I think it's especially important for women in midlife to really ask themselves these honest questions because the game's not over for us ladies. We still have plenty of good years in us. So, what do you want those years to look like? Do you want to spend them pursuing your passions, or do you want to spend them wondering if it's too late and not taking any action towards any of the things that you dream of doing? So I like to give some actual, real, tangible tips that you can take away from these videos and start using in your own life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do to get yourself unstuck and stop worrying about whether it's too late and actually start making some progress towards your goals. So the first one is going to be to stop comparing yourself to other people. I've said this before, it's one of my favorite quotes. Comparison is the thief of joy. And what that means is that when you're comparing yourselves to other people, it's very difficult to feel joy and to feel happiness because you're thinking about what they have and what you don't. And so it's already kind of putting like a negative spin on things instead of looking at what you have and what you can be grateful for and what qualities you have that you can build upon. Now, when you're comparing yourself to other people, you don't really, I mean, even if it's somebody you know really well, you still don't know all of their struggles and all of the things that have gone into them getting to where they are now. Unless you're actually standing in their shoes and living their life, you can't possibly know that. So even though you may have an idea and you're looking at them saying, "Oh, well, they're such a fast runner, but they started when they were in high school. They were the track, they were on the track team in high school, and I'm 45 and I've never gotten off the couch before." Okay, but you don't know what struggles they've had to overcome to get there, and you're comparing yourself to a completely different timeline, which is another thing to take into consideration. Just because somebody started earlier than you doesn't mean that they're going to be better or that you're not going to be able to do it. And maybe you won't be better than them, or maybe you won't do well, but you don't know until you actually give it a shot. But already counting yourself out because you are seeing other people who are already doing the things that you want to do That doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? Because you're basically just putting yourself on the sideline when you could actually be participating and really enjoying yourself. Comparison really kept me stuck as a runner for a long time. I didn't really feel like I was a true runner. My pace was slow compared to so many other people who I knew. And I think that because of that, I never really took it super seriously. I did the run walk run method, which is awesome, but I never tried to really push out of my comfort zone. So I would keep it like a really slow pace and never really worked on improving that. I really just worked on getting the miles in. And there is nothing wrong with that. But in my mind, I kept feeling like, oh, I wish I could be faster. I really would like to be faster. And I'd be looking at these other women who had been runners their whole lives. I have not been a runner my whole life. I didn't really start until my mid 30s. And even then, it was sort of like on and off. But I feel like I really did hold myself back for that. And last year, when I got back into running and really started again, I really started pushing myself. And then all of a sudden, my pace has gotten faster. I've been doing much better in my races. I've gotten several PRs this year, and that I like that because I'm actually competing with myself and not other people. And the second I started doing that and really, working in like speed work in my workouts and things like that, that's when I really started to improve, not when I was looking at other people and thinking that I sucked because I wasn't as fast as they were. The next thing that I would love for you to keep in mind as you're going through this process is to remember that reinvention or any type of change that you may want to make in your life is not going to happen overnight. It's usually a gradual process, and that's actually a good thing because usually if you try to take on too much, you get overwhelmed, it gets to be too much, and then you're like, forget it, I can't do this. But a gradual change, number one, is more likely to stick. And number two, it's easier to maintain and to build upon that so that you can really create a strong foundation for the change that you're working toward. A really great example of this is if you're somebody who maybe wants to change your diet. And maybe right now, you're eating a lot of fast food. You don't eat a lot of vegetables. You eat a lot, like you snack on things, like chips and things like that. Maybe the first thing you do is you take a look at all of that and look at how you can maybe replace some of the foods that aren't as healthy for you. So maybe you start by cutting out the fast food drive through, or maybe you limit it to once a week. You don't go completely cold turkey, you don't totally get rid of it, but you just sort of like gradually change stuff. You gradually cut things out while you also add things in. So maybe you're cutting out the fast food stops, but you're also adding in, maybe you're having a salad with your lunch now to add in those vegetables. And then, eventually your tastes kind of start to change. You want to make sure you're drinking plenty of water, that you're getting the fruits and vegetables, that you're getting adequate protein, that you're not overeating the things that aren't so great for you, like, heavily processed snack foods and junk food and fast food and those types of things. But what I'm getting at is that it's very difficult to overhaul your entire diet overnight. It's usually a gradual change. And I've worked with many people when I was a health coach to do that. Typically, we would start with make sure you're drinking enough water. And then the next week, it was let's add an extra serving of veggies to each day. And that was much more sustainable than telling people, all right, you're not going to eat this, you're not going to eat that, you're going to stop going to McDonald's, you're not going to order pizzas anymore. And I mean, people would be like, oh, well, I don't want to live that way. So it can be much more sustainable and meaningful to do it in a slow way, not put too much pressure on yourself, but have a plan that you can follow. The third tip that I'm going to give you is to let go of any type of label or identity that you have put on yourself. What I mean by this is, there are a lot of people who will say, like, oh, well, I'm just not good at that, or I'm not a morning person, or I've never been able to stick to anything. And that may be true that in the past, that was who you were or what you did, but it doesn't have to be who you are or what you do now. We can always overcome those labels. one of my favorite stories to tell is that I always thought of myself as a night owl. I was not a morning person. I used to tell people I wasn't a morning person. But as I got older and I wanted to start working in fitness into my routine, really the only time that I had to do that was in the morning. And so I started getting up earlier and pretty quickly found out that I was actually a morning person. Now, that doesn't mean that I jump out of bed excited to start my day, but I am much more productive in the morning than I ever was in the evening. So I get up earlier in the morning. I get up and do my workout. I often do some writing or some planning, um, just to, get the juices flowing and to get some things accomplished, because I know that the way my brain works, if I get to the afternoon, like 3, 4 o'clock, like I'm done. I'm useless. And maybe that's another story I'm telling about myself. But those early mornings have made me such a productive person. And if I had held on to that belief that I wasn't a morning person and that I couldn't possibly work out first thing in the morning or do any writing or anything like that, I would be missing out on so many things. I love working out in the morning now. I love being productive in the morning. And again, if I had just continued to stick to that old story about myself, that just it wouldn't be happening and it wouldn't be possible for me. And then the next tip I would give you is to really focus on building a life that feels better. So, that doesn't mean that again that you need to overhaul your whole life, but just kind of like look at the different pieces of your life. And is there anything that just doesn't feel right? Maybe, maybe you've been stuck in a dead end job for a long time, or maybe your relationship feels off, or maybe your health isn't where you would like it to be. There's usually something that just doesn't feel quite right. And that's really an opportunity to hone in on that and improve it. So, let's go with health again. If you're, maybe your blood work isn't coming back great, or maybe you're dealing with back pain or knee pain or something like that, you can start to work on a plan along with your doctor or, whoever you work with on health issues to improve that. And you can create a plan and you can make some changes so that you're, you know, doing better and feeling better and things are going well for you. Whereas if you didn't do anything at all, it might have progressed in the opposite direction where, your health may have deteriorated more. So, again, look at your life, look at what feels off, look at something that can be improved, and then you can start to build a plan around that. And then the fifth thing that I would love for you to keep in mind is just to stop waiting until you feel ready. You're never going to feel ready. And I remember when I was younger in my 30s, people would say that about having kids. Like, there's never a good time to have kids. There, life always happens. And, you just have to kind of like jump in. And boy, was that true. I had my daughter when I was 33. I guess I was as ready as I could be, but you just never feel ready. You never know what parenthood is going to throw at you. You never know what home ownership is going to throw at you. You never know what your day to day life is going to throw at you. And there's just never a good time to start something new. So, instead of waiting to feel like you're ready, prepare. Prepare for, any of the obstacles that could get in your way. Make a plan, set a schedule, have some flexibility within that schedule so that when life does happen, you can work around it. But, constantly just like thinking about things and, thinking about, I'm going to do this someday, or, once I get a new job, this will happen, or once my kids are out of the house, then I can do this. The more you wait, the more difficult it's going to be to get that momentum. And I mean, if you start now, a year from now, things could be completely different. So just remember that you don't have to feel completely ready. A lot of that stuff works itself out as you go. So I wanted to give another example from my own life, and it's not about running, it's not about creating this content, it's not about my eating habits. It's actually about creative writing. And some of you may know I published a book of poems last year. I think it was like last spring, and it was something that I had always had in the back of my mind. I was an English lit major in college. I loved poetry. I took every poetry class that I could. I wrote lots of poetry, I read lots of poetry, and then I graduated from college and barely ever looked at poetry again. But it was always something that I thought about, and it was always something that I thought I would come back to. But probably also felt like, you know what, it's a little too late, or it's frivolous. I have too many other important things to do, or whatever. But last year, before I got the job that I have now, I was unemployed for a period of time, and I was doing lots to stay busy. But there was a day that this poetry contest came across my feed on social media, and it was basically to get together a body of work and submit it, and the publisher may choose to publish it as a book. So I decided to give it a shot. I put all of those other thoughts aside, that I was too old, it was too late, I didn't know what I was doing, other people were better writers than me. I pushed all of that aside. And I figured this is a great thing for me to do. It would be a good habit to get into, to start writing again. And so I decided to sit down and write one poem every day. And I didn't really have a plan. I just sat down and decided, like, okay, well, this is what I'm thinking about today, so I'm going to write a poem about it. Some days it was like more deep stuff about like my childhood or my daughter or love, or really big intense feelings. And then other days it was about the palm tree that's in my backyard, or the raccoon that I saw around the corner, things like that. So I did it. I wrote a poem a day. And at the end of a month, I had enough poetry and enough content to submit. And not only was it chosen to be published as a book, but it also won an award from the publisher. So all of that is to say that it wasn't too late for me. And I'm so glad that I didn't listen to all of those little thoughts and doubts that were creeping into my head, because now I have a book of poems that I can, it's just something that I have forever. And I got lots of really great feedback. I had family and friends who purchased the book and read the poems, and it was really, really meaningful. And I'm so glad that I did it, and I'm so glad that I didn't hold myself back from it. So again, when we get into midlife, it's very common for people to think like, oh, it's too late, I'm too old. But I would love for you to sort of reframe that and think about the ways that you're actually really primed for change. At this point in life, we have more awareness, more experience, and more clarity. And that makes it easier to make a change. I know when I was younger, I was sort of like all over the place. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And I was also, really stuck in um, comparing myself to other people, to creating these like stories about myself that weren't really true, that I wasn't good at certain things. Now I'm just like, maybe I'll give it a shot. I don't care what other people think anymore. And I'm not worried about this. And it's just easier to do that. And I even find like when I make these videos and create content, that I'm not as nervous about being on camera. I'm not as nervous about what people are going to think about what I'm saying. Yeah, I've created content like this for probably 15 years now, on and off. And I can remember when I first started making videos, I was terrified. I didn't want to be, talking about my personal life. And, I was always worried that people would be like, well, who is she to, to give advice or whatever. And people might still be thinking that, but I don't care. I'm trying to reach people that this will be helpful and useful for, and it's also very therapeutic for me. So I do it, and I don't worry so much about what other people think. So I think a lot of us at this age are kind of at that point where we feel that way. And so it's a perfect time to make a change. It's the perfect time to really examine your life and figure out what it is that you want, what it is that you don't want, and how you can create goals and actions that align with what it is that you actually do want. So, a really simple starting point for making some sort of change in midlife is to kind of like look at your life holistically, look at like all aspects of your life. And are there areas, or is there one particular area that feels kind of off? Maybe it's your career, maybe it's your health, maybe it's your friendships or relationships. And really be honest here and look at whatever that aspect is, And if it feels off, where can you tweak it? And also, what stories are you telling yourself about it? Because if, for example, if it's your health, and maybe you are overweight and maybe it's starting to cause some problems, maybe you're having, maybe you're pre-diabetic, maybe you're starting to have heart issues, maybe you're starting to have pain in your joints, those kinds of things, then what can you change about it? And obviously, I think the answer would be to start changing your habits so that you're building health instead of detracting from your health. And stop telling yourself stories like, well, I'm just supposed to be this way, or, oh, I don't like to eat healthy, or I'm not good at sticking with an exercise routine. Push all of that aside. Those are just thoughts, those are just stories that you're telling yourself, and you can make changes. Now, I'm not saying that that's easy, and I'm certainly not oversimplifying weight loss and any type of like health related concerns, but I'm just using it as an example to illustrate that you can make changes and you can push aside those thoughts that are holding you back, and you can try new things and you can ask for help. It's not too late. It's never too late. You can always make a positive impact on different areas of your life just by taking small actions. So, to kind of sum all of this up, I think it's essential for you to remember that it is not too late for you. And there's no like, you're not disqualified from life just because you're in your 40s or 50s. Like, that's just not how it works. We all still have a lot of life to live. And you might as well live it, right? You might as well live it in a way that feels aligned to who you are, what you want, what you enjoy. And you don't need to count yourself out just because you think that you're too old or that it's too late. The biggest thing is really to tap into the belief that you can continue to grow, that it's not too late for growth, and that you can really grow and change and thrive at any age. Now, if this content is resonating with you, I would love for you to hit the follow button, leave me a comment below if there's something that you'd like to share, if this sparked anything for you, and make sure you're checking back because I post these videos once a week and I post shorts several times a week